What if I told you that in today's Canada, countless Canadians are being fired, not because of performance, not because of the economy, but because Indian hiring managers are quietly replacing locals with their own people? This is the shocking truth the media won't tell you. Stay with me. Chapter 1. The Hidden Takeover in the Workplace. Canada's workplace was once seen as a land of equal opportunity, where talent and dedication determined success. But a quiet change is happening, and many Canadians are starting to notice. Across offices, hospitals, logistics hubs, and IT firms, a new reality is setting in: the rise of favoritism-driven hiring. At the heart of this shift are hiring managers who seem to prioritize personal networks over qualifications, often choosing candidates who share their cultural or national background. For Canadians, this feels like a betrayal. Imagine working at a company for a decade, loyal and committed, only to watch as promotions and new jobs go exclusively to those within a manager's circle. The resentment builds quietly, but the impact is enormous. Jobs that once gave stability and dignity now feel out of reach. It doesn't stop at hiring. Entire workplace cultures shift when favoritism takes hold. Meetings begin to feel exclusive, where certain voices dominate and others are ignored. Workplace diversity stops meaning true variety of perspectives and instead becomes an illusion, a system where one community thrives while others are sidelined. Employees describe how job postings often become paper exercises. The listing goes up online, applications pour in, interviews are held, but in the end, the chosen candidate was pre-selected from the start. Canadians applying to these roles never stood a chance. These practices hollow out the idea of meritocracy. In Canada, people are raised to believe in fairness, that if you study hard, gain experience, and prove yourself, opportunities will follow. But favoritism dismantles that dream. Instead, a new rule takes over. It's not about what you know, but who you know, and more specifically, where you're from. The erosion of trust in the job market carries broader consequences. Workers stop believing in effort and skill. Motivation declines, turnover rises, and morale crumbles. For many Canadians, it feels as though the very promise of the Canadian dream is slipping away. Across industries, the same whispers emerge: IT companies dominated by closed hiring practices, hospitals where promotions skip experienced staff, and logistics firms where managers openly hire their friends or relatives from abroad. The pattern is too consistent to be ignored. This hidden takeover is not about one or two cases, it's systemic. And if Canadians feel they are outsiders in their own workplaces, it's because the rules of the game have changed, quietly and dramatically. Chapter 2. The Human Stories Behind the Numbers. Behind the statistics are real lives. John, a truck driver from Brampton, lost his job in logistics when a new hiring head arrived. Within 6 months, most of his Canadian colleagues were replaced by newcomers who all shared the same background as the manager. For John, the job wasn't just a paycheck. It was how he kept his family home afloat. Losing it meant falling behind on mortgage payments and spiraling into debt. Lisa, an accountant in Alberta, had been loyal to her firm for 8 years. When a senior role opened, she thought her dedication and expertise made her the obvious choice. Instead, the position went to someone recently flown in from overseas, personally recommended by the manager. Lisa wasn't just denied a promotion. She was told, in effect, that her Canadian roots were her weakness. Sarah, a nurse in Ontario, gave a decade of her life to patient care. But when a new department head took over, she saw a wave of staff changes. Experienced Canadian nurses were let go, replaced by individuals handpicked from the same community as the supervisor. Sarah was devastated. She had built her career on compassion and skill, yet loyalty meant nothing when favoritism dictated the future. These aren't isolated cases. They're multiplying across sectors. Teachers, engineers, healthcare workers, IT specialists. Countless Canadians share the same story. Years of dedication ignored, opportunities stolen, dignity stripped away. The emotional toll is crushing. Many workers spiral into depression after losing jobs they thought were secure. Families fracture under financial strain. Parents struggle to explain to their children why mum or dad can't work anymore. The scars aren't just economic, they're deeply personal. For young Canadians, the situation is even more discouraging. Graduates send out hundreds of resumes, attend interview after interview, only to be told, "We went with someone else." Later, they learn the truth. The job was filled before it was ever advertised. Their sense of hope fades quickly. The tragedy is that these workers are not lazy or unskilled. They are capable, trained and ready. But they are shut out by an invisible wall of favoritism, a barrier that grows higher with every passing year. Each story adds to a collective feeling of betrayal, that being Canadian in Canada has somehow become a disadvantage. And the more stories that emerge, the louder this grievance becomes. Chapter 3. Why this keeps happening. The spread of favoritism isn't random, it's systemic. Managers often prefer to hire people who share their culture, language and customs. On the surface, this may seem like human nature, but in practice it creates closed networks that exclude Canadians. The problem is compounded by internal referral systems. Many companies reward managers for recommending candidates, but instead of opening doors for diverse talent, this often becomes a tool to funnel jobs to pre-selected individuals from one background. Loopholes in immigration and labor laws also play a role. Some companies post open jobs as a legal requirement, but the real candidate has already been chosen. Canadians who apply are unknowingly participating in a charade. Power dynamics also drive this trend. A manager who surrounds themselves with their own builds loyalty and reduces the risk of being challenged. It becomes easier to control decisions when everyone at the table shares allegiance to the same leader. Once these closed circles are established, they expand quickly. A manager hires a colleague who then recommends another, who later becomes a hiring lead themselves. Before long, entire departments, sometimes entire companies, are dominated by one community. Canadians left on the outside feel powerless. They see the pattern, they know what's happening, but speaking out risks being labeled intolerant. So silence takes over, even as the injustice grows. This silence only strengthens the system. Without accountability, favoritism thrives unchecked, spreading from industry to industry like wildfire. And because it happens quietly, behind office doors, in hiring rooms, at HR meetings, the public rarely sees it. By the time Canadians realize how widespread it is, the damage is already done. Chapter 4. The psychological toll on Canadians. Losing a job is devastating under any circumstances, but losing it because of favoritism cuts deeper. For Canadians who experience this, the pain isn't just financial, it's psychological. It tells them they don't belong, that no matter how hard they try, their nationality counts against them. Fathers who once took pride in providing for their families now feel ashamed, powerless and broken. Mothers who work tirelessly to climb the ladder watch as their progress is erased in an instant. Young graduates full of hope become disillusioned before their careers even begin. This kind of rejection creates long-term mental scars. Anxiety, depression, and even suicidal thoughts are not uncommon among workers who feel discarded. They wonder if there is any point in trying, if the system is rigged from the start. Families absorb this pain too. Parents argue about bills, children sense the stress, and entire households unravel under the weight of uncertainty. Communities where multiple people lose jobs experience collective despair, fueling hopelessness. The cultural message is devastating. Being Canadian is no longer enough in Canada. Identity itself feels like a liability, a brand that limits opportunities instead of expanding them. Many affected workers begin to internalize the rejection, doubting their own abilities despite years of proven skill. This erodes self-esteem and weakens confidence, making it even harder to find new work. For youth, the message is particularly dangerous. Seeing their parents discarded and their own opportunities blocked, they begin to question whether Canada truly values them. This breeds cynicism and disconnection from society. Left unchecked, the psychological toll will become a generational wound, passed down as frustration and resentment from one Canadian household to the next. Chapter 5. The economic earthquake beneath our feet. Beyond individual pain, favoritism-driven hiring threatens Canada's economy. When skilled Canadians are left jobless, they can't contribute to spending, taxes, or growth. This weakens the very foundation of the country's financial stability. Already, part-time and gig work is rising among Canadians who can't secure full-time employment. This means less stability, more reliance on debt, and fewer savings for the future. Families living paycheck to paycheck are pushed even closer to collapse. Housing markets are one of the first casualties. Without stable jobs, Canadians can't afford skyrocketing mortgages or rents. This creates a ripple effect. Builders sell fewer homes, landlords face defaults, and communities struggle as families downsize or move away. Small businesses feel the squeeze too. Every job lost means fewer customers, shops close, restaurants struggle, and local economies shrink. The impact spreads far beyond those directly affected by favoritism. It hits everyone in the community. Productivity also suffers. Favoritism means jobs don't always go to the most qualified. Mistakes rise, efficiency falls, and innovation slows. Companies that once thrived on merit now stumble under mediocrity. This weakens Canada's competitiveness globally. In a world where countries fight for talent, Canada risks falling behind. When skill is replaced by favoritism, progress stalls. Debt levels are another danger. As Canadians lose stable incomes, they rely more on credit to survive. National debt rises, welfare systems strain, and long-term economic sustainability is threatened. Left unaddressed, this favoritism-driven earthquake could reshape Canada's economy for decades, making inequality permanent and prosperity a fading dream. Chapter 6. Silence from the top. Perhaps the most infuriating part of this crisis is the silence of leaders. Politicians know what's happening. They see the trends, hear the stories, and yet they remain quiet. Instead of addressing discrimination against Canadians, they hide behind slogans like, "Diversity is our strength." But slogans don't pay bills. Slogans don't fix hiring bias. Slogans don't put food on the table for families left behind. By ignoring the issue, leaders send a clear message. Appearances matter more than fairness. Immigration numbers are celebrated, GDP growth is advertised, but fairness for local workers is ignored. Canadians who dare to speak up risk backlash. They are accused of intolerance, even though their demand is simple: fairness in hiring. This silencing only deepens resentment. Silence also emboldens favoritism. Without political will to address it, managers know they can continue unchecked. They face no accountability, no investigation, no consequences. Meanwhile, Canadians grow increasingly frustrated. They wonder why their taxes fund leaders who won't even defend their right to a fair chance at work. The silence is not just frustrating, it feels like betrayal. The social contract between citizens and government is broken when leaders refuse to act. And the longer this silence continues, the more anger grows. Anger that will eventually demand to be heard, one way or another. Chapter 7. Canadians fight back. Despite the silence from leaders, Canadians are beginning to fight back. Social media has become their battleground, with countless posts exposing favoritism and fake hiring practices. Hashtags trend as workers share rejection stories and insider details. Videos go viral as Canadians vent their frustration. The digital age has given voice to those once silenced. Communities organize, creating online groups dedicated to exposing unfair practices. Stories are collected, patterns are revealed, and the public becomes harder to ignore. These voices are not driven by hate. They are driven by desperation and survival. Canadians want fairness, not privilege. They want the same rules applied to everyone. The movement grows as more Canadians realize they are not alone. The stories they thought were personal misfortunes are actually part of a wider systemic issue. Pressure builds on politicians as these stories gain traction. Journalists begin to cover the issue, breaking the silence. Awareness spreads, and with it, the demand for change. Canadians also push for workplace reforms, calling for stricter monitoring of hiring practices and penalties for favoritism. They argue that without accountability, the cycle will never end. The fight has only just begun, and while the road is long, Canadians are determined to reclaim fairness in their own land. Chapter 8. The Future. If nothing changes. If favoritism and biased hiring practices continue unchecked, Canada's workforce faces a deepening crisis. Already, unemployment among young Canadians is climbing higher than the national average. Thousands of graduates leave universities and colleges every year, only to face rejection after rejection. Many complain that entry-level jobs are being reserved for those already pre-selected through cultural networks. The economic impact will be staggering. A rising number of Canadians already rely on part-time or gig work to survive. If biased hiring continues, this number will only grow, leaving full-time, stable jobs concentrated within closed circles. Families will be hit hardest. Fewer steady incomes mean higher debt, more bankruptcies, and even more reliance on government assistance. Communities that once thrived on secure employment will sink under the weight of instability. Housing markets too will feel the shockwaves. Without good-paying jobs, Canadians will struggle to afford mortgages and rents that are already at historic highs. When people can't buy homes, demand falls for local builders, realtors, and small businesses tied to housing. In major cities like Toronto and Vancouver, where affordability is already a crisis, favoritism in hiring will pour fuel on the fire, locking even more Canadians out of both jobs and homes. Social tension will intensify. When locals feel shut out of opportunities in their own country, resentment grows. This resentment isn't against immigration itself. It's against a system that allows favoritism to dominate. If workplaces continue to prioritize connections over merit, Canadians will feel increasingly alienated, and the promise of multicultural unity will fracture under pressure. Instead of cooperation, we'll see rising division, finger-pointing, and even unrest. The damage won't stop at individuals and communities. On a national scale, productivity and innovation will collapse. Favoritism means less qualified candidates fill critical positions. Imagine hospitals where promotions depend on loyalty, not expertise. Imagine financial institutions where leadership teams are built on connections rather than skill. These cracks will erode efficiency, raise mistakes, and cost billions in lost productivity. Canada's global competitiveness will weaken, leaving the country vulnerable in a world where talent and innovation are everything. Younger generations will suffer most. Surveys already show that many young Canadians are considering leaving the country in search of opportunities abroad. If the pattern of closed hiring networks grows, this brain drain will accelerate. Canada will lose some of its brightest minds to countries where qualifications are rewarded, not overlooked. Imagine the irony of Canadian taxpayers funding education, only to watch their best-trained talent leave for greener pastures. Politically, the issue will become impossible to ignore. Leaders may continue to stay silent now, but as discontent spreads, pressure will mount. Citizens will demand accountability, forcing governments to choose between protecting fairness for locals or risking massive backlash at the polls. If ignored, the political landscape could shift dramatically, with rising movements centered on protecting Canadian workers. At the heart of it all is a question about Canada's future identity. Will it remain a nation of fairness, where opportunities are distributed based on merit and hard work? Or will it transform into a system where heritage, connections and favoritism decide who succeeds? If nothing changes, Canadians will increasingly feel like outsiders in their own homeland, a reality that could define not just the job market, but the very spirit of the country itself. If you found this eye-opening, make sure to hit the like button, share this video so more Canadians know the truth, and don't forget to subscribe for more hard-hitting stories the mainstream media won't cover. Drop a comment below. Have you or someone you know experienced this kind of job discrimination? Let's talk about it.